I'd like to speak about technology trends, which is something that many of you follow, but we also follow for related reasons. Obviously, being a technology magazine, technology trends are something that we write about and need to know about. But also, as part of being any monthly magazine, you live in the future. We have a long lead time. We have to plan issues many months in advance. We have to guess at what public appetites are going to be 6 months, 9 months down the road. So we're in the forecasting business. We also, like a lot of companies, create a product that's based on technology trends. In this case, ours is about ideas and information, and if we're lucky, some entertainment.
虽然只是一个开场白，各位可以看到，他把他的杂志定位成为说，他的杂志是一个什么样子的工作呢？他说他们的工作，很多人在出杂志的时候会讲说啊，我们就是出杂志。他不这样想，所以他的杂志才会成功。他说我的杂志呢是做的是预测的工作，所以我的工作是预测。为什么？因为我开始在编这一期的时候，其实我是6个月以前、6个月以后才要出的。我现在就要预测6个月以后会有那时候的人会不会对这件事情有兴趣，所以这个是一个预测的工作。然后他们出的杂志，你如果问一般的杂志的这个总编辑，他很可能会告诉你说啊，我们就是出我们的产品就是一本杂志。他不是这样想，他是这样想的。他说我们跟其他公司一样创造产品，但是我们的产品是想法跟讯息 ，ideas and information。所以 content 的价值是说我有没有 idea 可以提供给你，我有没有 information 可以提供给你，你不知道的，你很想知道的想法跟讯息。然后 hopefully 如果还可能的话，我还有一点点。
Ideas and information, and if we're lucky, some entertainment.
如果他够幸运的话，意思就是说，如果他这个能力还可以的话，他还可以让大家读那些东西的时候读得很有兴趣。所以，所有的 idea 跟所有的这个 information 又不能枯燥，还要看起来觉得有意思。所以，但是台湾的媒体大家都只做这里。然后不做 idea 也不做 information， 那 information 大概也都不太有价值的 information， 所以那个就是做不长。那所以这个地方我们可以从他那里学一点。
We also, like a lot of companies, create a product that's based on technology trends. In this case, ours is about ideas and information, and if we're lucky, some entertainment. But the concept's quite the same. And so we have to understand not only why a tech is important, where it's going, but also, very importantly, when. The timing is everything. And it's interesting, when you look at the predictions made during the peak of the boom in the 1990s about e-commerce or internet traffic or broadband adoption or internet advertising, they were all right. They were just wrong in time. Almost every one of those has come true just a few years later. But the difference of a few years on stock market valuations is obviously extreme. And that's why.
这一点也是在一个免费经济的时代，我们要特别注意的。他刚刚讲的是说，他如果回顾前面10年，大家在做的很多的预测，其实都对，因为预测并不是那么难。可是预测它掉到哪里去，哪一个地方会掉的，在那里发生？大家都预测的不准，通常都是预测的太早。那预测的太早，虽然还是准，但是重点是你的这个公司是不会成功的。所以时间点，意思就是说，预测一个时间会在哪里发生，是一切。意思就是说，你必须要很准的去做它，去看到它。所以在这一堂课里面跟各位讲很多的趋势。就是要让各位同学开始懂得怎么样去看准事情，所以你不管你是在从事的是建筑，从事的是其他的各种设计，或者从事的是别的事情，你都要学会，因为你的知识丰富，所以你在判断事情很准，很准是很重要的。
You've probably seen something like this before. This is the classic Gartner hype curve, which talks about kind of the trajectory of a technology's lifespan. And just for fun, we put a bunch of technologies on it to show whether it were kind of rising for their first hype peak, or whether they were about to crash into the trough of disillusionment, or rise back in the slope of enlightenment, or et cetera. And this is one way to do technology forecasting. Get a sense of where technology is, and then anticipate the next upturn. We tend to do any technology that we think is sufficiently important. We'll typically do it twice. Once, we want to do it first. We want to be the first to do it for the geeks who appreciate that. We'll catch it right there at the technology trigger. You can see in 1997, we put Linux on the cover. But then, it comes back, and sufficiently big technologies are going to hit the mainstream. They're going to burst out. And then it's time to do it again, last year. And that's one way that we try to time technology trends. I'd like to talk about a way of thinking about technology trends that I call my grand unified theory of predicting the future, but it's closer to a petite unified theory of predicting the future. It's based on the presumption, the observation even, that all important technologies go through 4 stages in their life. At least one of the 4 stages.
一个重要的观念，各位可以仔细的听他说一下。他就说，所有的这些科技的发展，其实不只是科技的发展，所有的事情的发展，大概都有这4个阶段。那这个4个阶段的每一阶段，他都讲得很清楚啊。所以你请各位仔细的听他说的每一个阶段的重点。
Sometimes all 4 of the stages, and at each one of these stages can be seen as a collision. A collision with something else, for example, a critical price line, that changes both the technology and also changes its effect on the world. It's an inflection point. And these are the inflection points that tell you what the next chapter in that technology's life is going to be, and maybe how you can do something about it. The first is critical price. The first stage in a technology's advance is that it will fall below a critical price. After it falls below a critical price, it will tend, if it's successful, to rise above a critical mass and penetration. Many technologies at that point displace another technology. And that's another important point. And then finally, a lot of technologies commoditize. Towards the end of their life, they become nearly free. Each one of those is an opportunity to do something about it. There's an opportunity for the technology to change. And even if you missed, the first boom of Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi did the critical price, it did the critical mass, but it hasn't done displacement yet, and it hasn't done free yet. There's still more opportunity in that. I'd like to demonstrate what I mean by this by going through this, telling a story of the DVD.
它的这个概念就是说，第一个价钱一定要到了很关键的大家可以接受的价钱，到了那个价钱到达的时候，它就会开始整个成长，把它的量变成到一个 critical 的量。到了 critical 的量，也就是关键的那个量出现的时候，它就有机会去取代把原来大家都在用的、生活上都在习惯的东西呢，就取代过来。所以它就是他刚刚说的第3点 ，another 这个 technology。那第3个如果发生的时候，它就变成非常非常的多人在用，到后来就变成几乎免费。所以他的刚刚的这一点的重点是说，他说这4点都可以给我们机会。你如果在每一个地方有一个地方你抓住，你大概就有机会去成功。所以他说 WiFi 的前面你如果没有抓住，后面它还是有一个可以取代，跟另外一个东西呢叫做免费。所以免费也是一个很重要的机会，也就是我们今天要说的。他现在用 DVD 的故事来说明他的想法。
Which is a technology which has done all of these. The DVD, as you know, was introduced in the mid-1990s, and it was quite expensive. But you can see that by 1998 it had fallen below $400, and $400 was a psychological threshold. And it started to take off. And you can see that the units started to trend up, a hidden inflection point. It is taking off. The next thing it hit, a year later, was critical mass. In this case, 20% is often a good proxy for critical mass in the households. And what's interesting here is that something else took off along with it, home theater units. Suddenly you have a DVD in the house, you've got high quality digital video, you have a reason to have a big screen television, you have a reason for Dolby 5.1 surround sound, and maybe you have a reason for starting to connect them and bring the rest of your entertainment in. What's interesting also is note that Netflix was founded in 1999. You know, Reed Hastings is here. He clearly saw that was a moment. That was an inflection point that he could do something with. The next phase it hit was displacement. You can see around 2001, it finally outsold the VCR. And here too, you can see the implications in the world at large. Netflix was right. The Netflix model could capitalize on the DVD in a way that the video rental stores couldn't. Among the DVD's many assets was that it's very small. You can stick in the mailer and post it cheaply. That gave an advantage. That was an implication of the technology's rise that wasn't obvious to everybody. And then finally, DVDs are approaching free. There's a company called Apex, a no-name Chinese firm who has, and several times in the past year, been the #1 DVD seller in America. Their average price for last year was $48. You're aware of the Walmart, well, perhaps apocryphal Walmart stampede over the $30 DVD. But that's, but they're getting very, very cheap. And look at the interesting implication of it. As they get cheaper, the premium brands, the Sonys and such, are losing market share, and the no-names, the Apexes, are gaining them. They're being commodified, and that's what happens when things go to zero.
各位在看到他讲这一段的时候，其实你可以看到他说，当这些东西都变成是没有名的品牌都可以卖得很多，那有名的品牌就变成没有人要买了，所以那个意思就变成是 commodity。我们曾经有一堂课讲到这一点，变成 commodity 就是大量的商品化的时候，它就会变成是越来越便宜，几乎是不要钱。其实媒体的内容现在就是这样。为什么现在电视的广告越来越没有人去做广告？为什么现在报社一家一家的关？为什么《纽约时报》也觉得它的竞争非常的困难呢？因为现在大家在对新闻这一点几乎是把它当成不要钱在看啊，所以你在看这一类的题目的时候，你要去想说，哦，那这个跟那个是一样的道理。
$400 was the psychological threshold, and it started to take off. And you can see that the units started to trend up, hit an inflection point. It is taking off. The next thing it hit, a year later, was critical mass. In this case, 20% is often a good proxy for critical mass in the households. And what's interesting here is that something else took off along with it, home theater units. Suddenly you have a DVD in the house, you've got high quality digital video, you have a reason to have a big screen television, you have a reason for Dolby 5.1 surround sound, and maybe you have a reason for starting to connect them and bring the rest of your entertainment in. What's interesting also is note that Netflix was founded in 1999. You know, Reed Hastings is here. He clearly saw that was a moment. That was an inflection point that he could do something with. The next phase it hit was displacement. You can see around 2001, it finally outsold the VCR. And here too, you can see the implications in the world at large. Netflix was right. The Netflix model could capitalize on the DVD in a way that the video rental stores couldn't. Among the DVD's many assets was that it's very small. You can stick in the mailer and post it cheaply. That gave an advantage. That was an implication of the technology's rise that wasn't obvious to everybody. And then finally, DVDs are approaching free. There's a company called Apex, a no-name Chinese firm who has, and several times in the past year, been the #1 DVD seller in America. Their average price for last year was $48. You're aware of the Walmart, well, perhaps apocryphal Walmart stampede over the $30 DVD. But that's, but they're getting very, very cheap. And look at the interesting implication of it. As they get cheaper, the premium brands, the Sonys and such, are losing market share, and the no-names, the Apexes, are gaining them. They're being commodified, and that's what happens when things go to zero. It's a tough market out there. Now that I've introduced these four ways of looking at technology, these 4 stages of technology's life, I'd like to talk about some other technologies out there, just technologies on our radar, and I'll use this lens, these 4, as a way to kind of tell you where each one of those technologies is in its development. They're not necessarily the top 10 technologies out there. They're just examples of technologies that are in each one of these periods. But I think that the implications of them approaching these crossovers, these intersections, is interesting to think about. Start with the gene sequencing. As you probably know, gene sequencing, in large part because it's built on computers, is falling in price at a kind of a Moore's Law-like level. It's now possible to, will be possible, and if Craig Venter indeed comes today, he may tell you something about this, to sequence the human genome for $40 million by the end of this year. That's as opposed to billions just a few years ago. You know, our ability to capture the tools of creation are getting closer and closer. What's interesting is that at the same time, the number of genes that we're discovering are rising very quickly. Each one of these genes is a potential diagnostic test. There will come a day when you can have hundreds of thousands of tests done very cheaply if you want to know. You can learn about your own mosaic. Here's another technology that's approaching a critical price. This is a fascinating research from WHO that shows the effect of generic drugs on antiretroviral drug compounds and cocktails. In January 2000, the price was $10,000 or $27 a day. The generics came in first in Brazil and elsewhere, and the effect was just dramatic on pricing. Today, it's less than 50 cents a day. And what's interesting is if you look at the price elasticity, if you look at a correlation between these two, as the antiretrovirals come down, the number of people you can treat goes radically up. And the Clinton Foundation and WHO believe that they can treat 3 million people worldwide by 2005, 2 million in sub-Saharan Africa. And the falling price of drugs has a lot to do with that. Linux is another good example. This now, we've switched to critical mass. These are now technologies that are hitting critical mass. And if you look here, here's Linux in red, and it's hit 20%. Interestingly, it's done a crossover before, but not the crossovers that matter. The crossover that's going to matter is the one with the blue. But you can look and see the direction those lines are going. You can see that at 20%, it's now taken seriously. It's not just for the geeks anymore. That is, I imagine, what people in Redmond wake up in the middle of the night thinking about. Another technology that we see all around us out here is hybrid cars. I don't know whether anybody has a Prius 2004, but they're fantastic. And if you look at the trends here, by about 2008, and I don't think this is a crazy forecast, there'll be 2% of auto sales. 2% isn't 20%, but in the car business, which is slower moving, that's huge. That's a rival. Once at 2%, you start seeing them on the roads everywhere. And what's interesting about the hybrids taking off is you've now introduced electric motors to the automobile industry. It's the first radical change in automobile technology in 100 years. And once you have electric motors, you can do anything. You can change the structure of the car in any way you want. You can have regenerative braking. You can have drive-by-wire. You can have replaceable body shapes. It's a little thing, and it starts with a hybrid, but it can lead to a whole new era of the car. Voice over IP is something you may have heard something about. Again, it's kind of coming out of nowhere. It's a little hard to use right now. There's a company created by the Kazaa founders called Skype. Look at these numbers. They launched it in August of last year. They already have 4 million, nearly 4 million registered users. That's critical mass. And the same thing's happening on the carrier side. You're looking at IP taking over from some of the traditional telecom standards. This is a tipping point. If Malcolm's here, forgive me. And it's going to change the economics and the speed and the players in the industry. It's going to look a little bit like that. And finally, free. Free is really, really interesting. Free is something that comes with digital because of the reproduction costs are essentially free. It comes with IP because it's such an efficient protocol. It comes with fiber optics because there's so much bandwidth. Free is really the gift of Silicon Valley to the world. It is it's an economic force, it's a technical force, it's a deflationary force if not handled right. It is abundance as opposed to scarcity. Free is probably the most interesting thing. And here you have just the number of songs can be stored on a hard drive. That could be films either, but it's basically every song ever made can be stored on $400 worth of storage by 2008. It takes that entire element, the physical element of songs off the table. And you've seen the numbers. I mean, the music industry is imploding in front of our very eyes, and Hollywood's worried as well. They're facing a force that they haven't faced before, and their response is draconian, and not necessarily the one that's going to get them out of this. And finally, I'll give you one last example of free, perhaps the most powerful of all. I mentioned fiber optics. Their abundancy tends to make things free. This is the price of a phone call to India per minute. And what's interesting is that it was just 1990 when it was more than $2 a minute. India had still has a regulated phone system, and so did we. It was surprisingly non-innovative, moved very slowly, but then there was just so much fiber out there. It couldn't hold back, and look how quickly the price fell. You now can get it's 7 cents a minute in many cases, and the consequence of cheap phone calling, free phone calling to India is the pissed off programmer. It's the outsourcing. It is probably one of the most dramatic shifts in globalization and one of the most powerful economic tools that we're seeing in our world today. The force of India and China and any other country that can be reached, that can contact our markets and work with our companies because the communications are free, is just beginning to be felt. And I think that's probably one of the most important technology trends that we're looking at today. Thank you.
刚刚他讲的最后一点，是一个免费经济里面的一个重要的思考，也就是说，他的这个光纤，全世界铺了那么多，所以频宽变成非常的便宜。频宽变成非常便宜的时候，他刚刚说了一个概念，就是说，因为频宽很便宜，所以印度变成可能把经济拉起来。为什么？因为印度就可以接美国的生意，去写美国的程式。印度人可以在印度就可以替麦当劳接麦当劳的订货。意思就是说，你在美国，你在一个这个 drive through 进去，然后你再跟一个机器讲说我要订什么订什么订什么，那个不一定是里面那个人在订哦，那个人可能在印度哦。那因为光纤已经是几乎不要钱。所以它产生了这个好处，那么这样子的一个好处，当然就是对于在当地本来在写程式的人就是坏处嘛。但是可能各位也要可以多想一想，就是说，那它还有什么其他的变化？其实有，如果你要稍微动点脑筋想。我们现在在电脑上面可以看到我们上课的几个小时的课程，都可以在网络上看到。那跟电视有什么不一样？没有什么不一样。你可以把它投在荧幕上看到很大，所以它跟电视没有什么不一样。那电视为什么以前可以卖那么多钱的广告？是因为电视的频宽是有限的。为什么台湾的有线电视只有那几台呢？因为所有的频宽就是那么多，政府分一分就是分给那几台，台视、中视、华视、民视、公共电视，其他没有了。你还要再去申请也没有了。那因为频宽这么少，所以它就变成很贵。可是你有没有想过，当现在所有的影片都可以在电脑上走的时候，当你看电视的时候，你需要说节目几点钟看，我要跟着它看。你看电脑的影片，它随时你想看的时候，你就可以拿起来看。它电视这个频宽的价值就变零了，因为以前叫做我看不到，或者是电视上面要看影片看得断断续续，你就觉得很讨厌。慢慢的，当 光纤的发展更努力。这一次 NCC 不是叫所有的大家说那个所有电信公司要降价的原因，其实从这里看起来，就是说真正的成本其实快要变成零。所以当我们开始体会到这个时代的时候，你就可以了解到说，哇，那这个时代电视没有掉，不只是表示说电视机没有掉，电视机不会没有，电视机会变成接了一条光纤，变成你在看电脑的那一台。所以你在桌子上看你是看这么小的，在墙上看你是看电视那么大，其实它都变成电脑。它真正不见得是提供内容的那个公司，叫做电视公司就不见了。那个才是一个比较大的影响。那更大的影响就是说，以前的企业它要靠着去买广告的一个时间，30秒多少钱，20秒多少钱，10秒钟多少钱，花很多的钱去插在人家的节目中间一段一段，他现在还需要吗？你现在如果去看 BMW 做的广告，他请了吴宇森去做了一支广告，5分钟。他去哪里播？在电视上播吗？没有，他就直接在电脑上他就播了，大家还可以把它传来传去，说哇，这里有一个侦探片，开车追来追去，那他把它拍得很像是电影，但是事实上是他的广告，所以那个也不同了，他已经不需要靠电视这个媒体去替他播广告，他自己就在播广告了。所以这个意思呢，就是一个当我们开始讲免费经济的时候，就是说因为免费后面有很多机会，这个是他刚刚说的那个，我们就要听得懂他在讲什么，不是只是把它听过去，你要多想，所以你要看得更真切，想得更深切，就是看得更真，想得更深，你才能够真正的知道说这些人在讲的到底是在讲些什么道理啊。那我只能够在这里帮助大家多去引导大家去想这一类的事情。